Welcome back to Podsauce. I'm Dax Holt.
I am Alesha Renee.
And I am so excited. I am so excited to talk to Liz Iacuzzi and Tyler Measom from Was I in a Cult? I was just introduced to this podcast.
Yes.
And I am already hooked, guys. It is so good. It is so good.
First of all, kudos to y'all for making an episode that I'm sure was just really, is heavy, you know, but you were able to interject moments of humor. How you did it, got nothing. But yes. Break that episode down. Well, first of all, hold on, sorry, just to backtrack. Break down just cult, your podcast in general for people who haven't.
Sure. Well, we do a podcast called Was I in a Cult? And it features individuals who were in and left cults. First-person stories of their journey in a cult and what it takes to be in a cult. Plus, we profile a little bit about the cult itself, some of the leader, and what it takes to leave that cult and to leave it in your mind, if you will, as opposed to just physically leave a cult.
What I like is that you guys kind of, if I'm hearing it correctly, the way I heard it, you guys do a story within a story because you allow some of the story to play out from the first person perspective, but then you back out of it with your commentating.
Yeah, it's like commentary.
Yeah, commentary.
And because sometimes at least with the episode that I listen to, it's like they talk about their story and then you're like, hold on, let me jump in and explain what the person is talking about. And I found it very helpful. And then you also lighten the mood because some of these topics are extremely heavy.
Right. We don't want to leave you wanting to kill yourself, you know.
Yeah.
The goal is it's a hopeful, inspiring show, and the point is to sort of humanize the cultic experience. I think a lot of media and a lot of shows out there focus on the cult itself and the salaciousness of that cult leader, and that's all fascinating and cool and whatever, and I get it. But these are about the individuals, and it's just showing how an individual does, you know, we show the before story, so you relate to them. You're like, oh, it's like my uncle or my sister or me or whatever. And you build that world where you show that they're a human, you know, and then what the manipulation is into the environment, then what the environment is like, where it starts, you know, usually rose-colored glasses and good, where the darkness seeps in, where the toxicity starts to come in, and then the realization, oh, sorry, can I swear?
Live your life. Live your best life.
It will get bleeped, but live your best life.
Live your life.
Oh, I'm in a cult, or whatever that is, and sometimes that's a big realization. Sometimes it's reading a newspaper, as you experience in that episode.
It's so good because often when I see these news stories, I'm like, how did someone get into this?
Right.
Like, how is that even possible that they ended up in this situation? Like, it blows my mind. But then I listened to the NXIVM episodes, and you were lured in, and there was all these promises of goodness and bettering your life and being a good person, and then it just goes down the rabbit hole.
I love that episode for that reason. I feel like that's one of our better episodes that really showcases the how of it, and makes people go, oh, I could have got tricked into it. I could have done that, you know, in that moment in time.
Well, I mean, we say nobody joins a cult. Nobody knowingly joins something where they're going to have to eventually have sex with a 75-year-old man or whatever it may be. They join a movement. They want something to better themselves, to better the world, to get to heaven, to lose weight, to chase their dreams, whatever it may be.
That's what I'm doing wrong.
We have some people.
I'm not doing the weight loss
we have
thing,
some
right?
groups you might want to.
We'll talk.
And eventually they just get kind of lured into this group of like-minded individuals.
Yeah.
The difference is, or the problem is, it's usually run by a sociopath, a narcissistic leader who is thinking only of him or herself.
You know, Dax listened to the NXIVM episode. You know, as I said previously, I listened to the Pray for Death, which covered the Children of God. The only connection or knowledge of the Children of God cult that I knew of was obviously, you know, River and Joaquin Phoenix, like their family used to be a part of that cult. But you guys were able to break this down from a first-person perspective. So break that episode down for people who haven't checked it out. We are going to put it up on our site, as well as the NXIVM one specifically.
We'll link to it.
Link to it, yes. But please break that.
Well, the girl we interviewed, we actually have another Children of God, and there's some interesting.
It's a twofer?
Well, it's a different. It's a completely different story, same cult, and that's another thing we do on the show. We will show like same cults from multiple perspectives to show you how individual the experience is and how different they really are. But that specific Children of God Pray for Death is about Flor Edwards. She was born into it. So that's a trickier sometimes to be born into. You have no before story. You don't
know anything else?
don't
but
have
that.
any touchstone
That's
to
your
know,
life,
oh,
yeah.
this thing that's happening to me isn't normal.
Right.
I gotta tell you, this podcast though is so addicting because I listened to the first because it was a two-parter for the NXIVM. I listened to it, and because of what we do, we need to listen to multiple podcasts. And so I was like, all right, we've got another guest. I listened to 10 minutes of theirs, and I couldn't stop thinking about the conclusion. And I was like, sorry, I gotta go back to this podcast. Like, it is so
awesome.
in depth, and it is a phenomenal podcast. How do you guys get your guests? How do you find them?
You know, there are thousands of cults in the United States, and there are people who've left them, and they're usually a little more vocal. I mean, look, good stories happen to those who can tell them. So we try to find individuals who didn't just leave a cult, but can tell their story well and effectively. And sometimes they've written a book, sometimes they've had blogs, things of that nature. So they're kind of past the stage of leaving a cult and still a little, you can believe me now, up in the brain. They can now look back.
We should let it ride.
They can look back with a little bit of fun and with a little bit of experience and knowledge, as opposed to being sunk in it.
Yeah, they're not still in the trauma, right? They've done the healing. That's another thing. The people we interview, we make sure they're out and have perspective on their experience, because we're not here to exploit trauma or re-traumatize somebody.
How you guys are able to intertwine, give the business, and also take breaks. Was that intentional? Was it because it was hard for you guys to digest while studying, so you wanted to?
I think we do use levity in it, and part of the reason is because without it, it'd be 50 minutes of just abuse and sadness and heartbreak.
Fair.
And so I think that it's important in storytelling in general, and I'm a documentary filmmaker, and I always think it's important to put levity in stories in general, because otherwise it's just dour and it's heartbreaking and it's sad. And when you put levity in a dark situation, it makes the dark darker and the levity a little bit more levitous, funny, how's that? So I think it's a nice balance to put those two in. And Liz and I are very careful not to make fun or jest of somebody's story, the person themselves. Do we make fun of the situation in some aspects? Yes. Do we make fun of cult leaders who are sadistic and horrible and awful? Yes, we do. And there's a balance in between there, and some people think it's terrible that we do that. We think it's all right to kind of have a little bit of
It's
fun.
the intermission.
Yeah.
It's the commercial.
Yeah.
break.
Yeah, it's the palate cleanser.
Yeah.
And it's my hope too is that our voice is what the audience is maybe thinking or feeling, and then we say it and they go, oh, I was thinking that too.
Or just, oh, I can breathe
Right,
for
I
a
can
second.
breathe, like,
I can
right,
relax.
Exactly.
I mean, cults in general just are fascinating, and I think that's probably why there's been so much success with your podcast, because there's so much of a factor of like, how, why, what's happening, what's going on behind closed doors, and you guys are essentially letting people in on that.
Yeah, but we're also showing a bit of why someone would join a cult. And also, I mean, I think the term
Except
cult
they wouldn't
is,
join it.
Except they wouldn't join it. I think the term cult can be a little bit misleading in some ways, or overused. It can be cliche. Like people say, "Oh, I'm in CrossFit. You're in a CrossFit cult."
Fair.
Or sometimes a religion, a large
Peloton.
mainstream religion, is a cult, but because it's so large and old that it isn't a cult. So we kind of break down what a cult can be, and sometimes a cult can just be within a family. We have one episode where the cult is her family, or episodes of a toxic relationship can have cultic situations within it. So we look a little bit more than just the weird Moonies or the strange cults, but just cultic experiences within someone's life. I mean, hell, you can have a job that can be toxic and cultic in some aspects.
Yeah, I think if you can understand an abusive relationship, it's just the heightened version of that to the extreme in some cases. And so it is to spread awareness, right? And so to make you start to think about your life. And we always say, like, if there's some woman driving in her car in Alabama who's like, listens to an episode and goes, I'm in an abusive relationship with my husband. And it doesn't even have to be a cult, but just she's able to process her experience in a new way, and then she like is able to get her life back together. I'm like, my job is done, because that's the whole point, sort of to bring it down to the human level instead of being like the voyeur looking in at all those crazy people. Like, that's fine. But I think the reason we do that with a lot of cult shows is because the storyteller telling that story is telling you, look at this crazy cult.
I think the saddest part is that people that are in cults need to hear these stories, but they're being sheltered away
Right.
from them, so
Yeah,
they're
I
never
know.
going
Yeah.
to
Right.
hear the reality of their life isn't
That's
normal,
true.
especially someone brought up in it. You had mentioned before
Correct.
the camera started rolling that
Yeah.
you were born in Utah, that you were a part of the Mormon faith, and
I
that you are
was.
no longer a Mormon. Is
Yes.
there, what's the backstory there?
I mean, look, I was raised as a Mormon. I was raised in Utah, to a nice Mormon family. I was raised to believe the religion. And when I was 19, like a good Mormon boy does, I went on a Mormon mission. If you've seen Book of Mormon musical, you may know a little bit about it. So for 2 years of my life, I wore a white shirt and tie and tried to convert people to Mormonism in Nebraska and Kansas. And then I got
Were you
home.
successful?
I was
How,
very
I was
good
gonna
at
say,
it.
how
Yeah.
many doors
Yeah.
closed on your face?
A lot. But I was actually very, actually pretty good at it.
Okay.
And I think it's just the storyteller in me. I just tried to tell stories with these individuals. Anyways, I got home and started researching and realizing that there's a lot of ugliness in the Mormon church. There's a lot of history of polygamy, of misogyny, of racism, abject racism. I mean, just kind of this hidden dark history that I didn't realize. I mean, polygamy is horrendous. There, and it's still rampant in some of the offshoots of the Mormon faith. We did an episode on a Mormon sect that practiced polygamy. And so I started reading this and realized that what I had learned and everything that they said was true, I realized wasn't.
Yeah.
And part of leaving that faith was difficult and, disappointing my God and my family and my community and being ostracized to some level. So a bunch of my art since then has been about belief and why we believe and deception. And this is part of it.
Has there been peace there? Because you say my God, but that God is in reference to that journey through
My
the Mormon
former
faith.
God of the
Right.
Mormon God, if
Right.
you will. So I went through a journey and leaving it in my mind and how difficult that was. And so, and Liz also, I mean, Liz was in a cult. So we've both
Oh.
gone in and out
You
of
buried the
cults.
lead.
Whoa!
I was waiting for you guys to
All right, let me get comfy. Hold on.
Her cult is a little crazier. It's a strange.
It's coming. It's
when
coming.
She told me, it
Episode,
blew my mind.
So you're going to be a
12.
guest and the host
Correct.
on
Give
an
me a-
episode?
give us
And
a
I interviewed
snip.
4 people from my experience.
Did you know them?
Oh yeah, we were in a
Talk.
It's here in LA. I had just moved to LA from
Okay.
Chicago. I was in my early 20s. And I had done comedy in Chicago for a while and was like, I want to try straight acting, right? Because I never should have done that because that's never what I wanted to do. But I thought, oh, maybe I should like learn some acting skills. And at the time, I was in a very toxic relationship with a guy who I was living with. And I bring him up because he brought me to this, so I think there is patterning, and that's what I was able to realize and sort of get rid of all the narcissists in my life after many years. But he was a pretty abusive, narcissistic. He was an addict. He wasn't using. I didn't really know anything about addiction. I was like, oh, you don't drink? Okay, no problem. I didn't know all of the degrees of what comes with that if you're not working on your stuff, so to
Yeah.
speak. So he actually, I was like, I want an acting coach who's like gonna be tough and who's gonna be real with me and just shoot me straight and like make me a better artist, right? And he was going to this woman for like life coaching help. And he was obsessed and like into it, and he's like, you know, she teaches an acting class too, and I met a lot of the people in the class and they're fantastic and I think you would love them. And I didn't really know anybody in LA at the time. And so he said, go to this acting class. And so I go to this acting class, and it's great work. It's weird a little bit, but I'm like, LA's weird anyway, right?
Fair.
And after the first class, sort of got like attacked by a bunch of the people in the class, and were like, in a good way, right? That's the love bombing part
Yeah,
of it. They're
yeah.
like, you're be perfect for this class, da 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 da. Like,
They
but
gaslit the hell out of you, didn't they?
right. And so I was like, okay, I'll sign up for the next session. And then it was a woman teacher, and she ended up being a cult leader.
Spectacular.
And it turned into a self-help cult. And that was my experience. And years later, because I'm also a comedy writer, I wrote a half-hour dark comedy about a bougie Hollywood cult that actually parlayed me to this.
I have so many questions.
Yeah.
How did you know the moment, like, how did you realize I'm in a cult then?
Yeah.
Not till, okay. There was a couple of us that had been studying with her for a few years, and we're just seeing more of her human, because they would say her channel is amazing and her work is amazing, and she was a nasty, horrible human, but then they justify that, right, as all cults do. Mine was a very weird moment where we were just really unhappy with her and seeing things, and one of my friends in the class sent me an article that said, from like a magazine that was like, how do you know if you're in a cult?
Wow.
You were
I was
checking
like,
boxes.
and I was like, check, and I just checked everything, and I was like, holy this is a cult.
But that has to be so eye-opening, though, because if your friend had the wherewithal with what was going on with you, that
Well,
they
she was
felt
also-
inclined
right.
to be like,
No, she was in it with me.
Oh,
and
so
and
it
she
triggered
said-
her
She
and then-
goes,
okay.
look at this article, I think we're in a cult.
Wow.
And then,
okay.
and then I shared that with some of my closest
I mean,
friends. But I will say a lot of people who were in that class won't, to this day, I would say 10 to 20% will admit it was a cult.
And then the rest
The
are
rest
just,
are like, oh, it was a class. I got a lot of great, because there was good tools we learned in the class. I got a lot of great things
was
out
she
of it. and
taking
then I
money
left.
from you guys?
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there was
Okay.
lots of money exchanged.
Money and
Okay.
retreats,
Yeah.
and if you want to deepen your craft, you have to deepen yourself. And I mean, I could
So
go on and on about
that article
Okay.
obviously opened your eyes. Have you guys heard from anyone out there saying your podcast has made them realize what they're doing is
That's good.
essentially a cult?
Not in their
Not as
current
yet.
form, but we have gotten some things like you gave me language to my childhood, or this reminded me so much of what I went through, or thank you for giving me words to speak to something. So I think maybe it opens eyes to, nobody said yet, oh, I'm in a cult right now, but I bet some people are thinking
Someone out
about
there,
it.
I'm
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah,
and
we're
maybe they're not
relatively
realizing it at this
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Well, that's
maybe
the
they
other
have-
thing. You
yeah.
can plant a seed, and that seed, it just depends on how long it takes for it to grow.
What something
And
is Tyler? I'm sorry.
It might
Tyler, go
keep
ahead.
people from joining one. It
Yeah.
might, when they say, oh my God, this is a self-help group that wants me to give me money, wants them to give me money, I
Right.
might say maybe this is a cult.
You know, self-help
Yes.
is obviously huge around the world.
Yes.
And a lot of it, you know, you do pay money. So what would you say are the top 3 like red flags that people should watch out for to make sure you're entering a self-help versus you're entering a potential
good,
cult?
I would say a red flag would be if they're not trained. A lot of times, if they're not therapists, if they're not, you know, there is a reason why professional mechanics work on your car. There's a reason why doctors have degrees, and there's a reason why therapists have degrees. Because getting in and fucking with your brain, that takes someone who knows what they're doing. And a lot of times self-help groups don't have that, or in the case of NXIVM, actually spur that and say, that's what they teach. We do it differently.
Because
Right.
we're people.
Because we're people, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a red flag.
Yeah.
It's like if you're giving to the institution more than you're getting from the institution, that should be a problem.
Yes.
And if the person says to you, you're living your life X way, and I have the solution for you to live your life this other way.
Come
Like
on
it's
now.
me who has the solution,
solution.
run the other way.
Yeah.
Or if you see in the group setting, the leader or the person running
charge,
even the class is exploiting somebody else's trauma in front of the class to teach a lesson, no.
I know that's right.
Also,
No.
if they ask you to get branded and have a brand put on your skin,
Sometimes
of
that
their,
does,
of
yeah,
their-
throw up a
then I
red
would
flag.
say, yeah,
Sometimes
time to-
forever
those
red
flags are
flag.
burgundy.
Yeah, but also if they say, often it's the money, like in the NXIVM one, oh, if you sign up today, you get a discount. Nope, run.
Yeah.
If there's any feeling like, oh, I'm gonna miss out on something if I don't act immediately, run. That is manipulation, and
It is so
That's
fascinating.
such a bad spiral because I can look at all these, as I'm looking for an apartment right now, I can't tell you how many apartment complexes, like if you don't move in now,
Oh yeah.
you want to
Yeah.
be here.
You want to be in this beautiful cult
You better get your butt in here.
Salespeople
with a washer and dryer.
use manipulation tactics all day long.
do.
All day long.
Yeah, they do love bombing. Oh my God, you look great in that shirt.
Yeah.
That shirt, you need to buy that shirt. So we're kind of accustomed in
Yeah.
advertising and marketing
Right.
to join these groups and to be easily initiated.
For $9.99.
Or payments. But what's happening is people think cults are far away, and they're in the 60s and 70s, which, yeah, there were a lot of cults in the 60s and 70s. But in today's world, we're seeing it much more.
Yeah.
And in fact, I think the pandemic has actually, it used to be that a cult was like you went to a commune, you put on robes or whatever, and you went and preached in front of this group, and that's where you went. And you lived there, or you went there weekly. Now, I think especially exacerbated by the pandemic, we're seeing cults online. And QAnon and things of these groups where they find like-minded individuals who believe what they believe, and they can be thousands or tens of thousands of miles apart, and that's kind of the modern-day cult.
Yeah. The recruitment is happening stronger online in a way because they're hiding behind a screen, so they don't have any care about you. They're just like trying to get you. That's the other thing, watch out. If you get recruiters, anybody who after you do the class and then you have these recruiters come up to you, that's another red flag. And if you get multiple people talking to you about why this diet would be so good for you, then no.
So we are a podcast discovery show. It's all about discovering new podcasts, finding out what's great out there. I want to know what you guys are listening to so that people can check in some other great podcasts. Tyler, what are you listening to?
I gravitate towards the documentary style podcasts and the storytelling. So I love the 99% Invisibles, This American Life, Snap Judgments.
American Life is good.
Kind of the classics. But I also just found a nice one, Lost in Sports. I kind of like. As a sports fan, it kind of tells mysteries of sports. Kind of fun.
That's cool. What about you guys?
I did just start listening to Smartless.
Oh,
That's
that's
great.
good.
It's super fun, and I think the interview is really interesting. And
I like the
Those guys are
concept.
funny.
It's like
Yeah.
the dinner party that
Yeah.
you're invited to. You don't know who's
You don't know
coming.
who's
Yeah,
coming,
you bring
yeah.
the mystery guests there, and they're funny, they're great, and they get the biggest guests in the entire
yes.
world.
And then they're like, "How'd you do that?" I love at the end when they're like, "How'd you get him to come?" Like,
Yeah.
the Will
I
Ferrell
still got to
episode.
listen to the George
Clooney one is
episode.
Oh,
I still
I
have
have
to
to
listen to
listen to
Go
that.
listen to that one.
Tyler, Liz, thank you guys so much. Host
Thank
of
you.
Was I in a Cult, which is an iHeart podcast production. But you guys can definitely check that out at podsauce.com. We're going to send the links to the NXIVM episode, My Pray for Death, for the Children of God. Phenomenal episode. I didn't listen to the
But
NXIVM
listen to the
one yet.
NXIVM
Right.
first, and then you can listen to
This
it.
is not about to be a war of the cults. Stay away from all cults, but listen to all episodes.
Yeah.
Thank you guys
Thank
so
you.
much for taking the time out to come kick it with us. Don't go anywhere, guys. We got more. This is Podsauce.